Hi, I'm Scott Wrighton. I serve as Decatur's City Manager. Every week you can find a link on our website about these videos, which include information about what we're doing with our services and announcements and special events here at the City of Decatur. The first thing I want to talk about is not really related at all to the services of the City of Decatur, but it's so important that I think that it warrants mentioning. Of course, everybody knows that November 8th is General Election Day, and I want to encourage you to vote. The local county clerk that manages the election process here in Macon County has made it very accessible. You can go in and advance vote. In fact, that's what I did. We just went down to the county offices there at the corner of Main and Wood Street, just on the south side of downtown Decatur. As we get closer to the election, they have extended hours. They're open from 8:30 in the morning until 7 at night, right up through the day before the election. Monday the 7th is the last day that they'll be available for those extended hours. Even on Saturday and Sunday, they're going to have those offices open from 9 to 4, so that people can just walk in and you give them their address. And I can tell you from having already voted that with the exception of the fact that they don't ask for identification, other than that, I will tell you that the process is very orderly and certainly appears to be very secure as well. So exercise your fundamental right to vote by casting your ballot on the 8th or sometime before that by going in and voting early at the county offices. This week there are a couple of public events, one of which happened yesterday, another one that happens later in the week that I'd like to draw your attention to. Yesterday, Senator Dick Durbin, who represents us in the United States Senate, was in Decatur to talk about a funding announcement we had already made for $16.8 million in funding for the Decatur Transit system. Now, a portion of this money goes to buy new fuel-efficient hybrid buses, but the bulk of the money actually goes to make sure that we have the facilities here in Decatur to support these vehicles as they transition to more fuel efficiency. It's fine to make an announcement that you're going to buy shiny new buses that we buy from the East Coast or the West Coast, where the investment of those funds doesn't generate any job activity here in Decatur. But it's perhaps less well known that you have to have the ability to charge those vehicles. You have to have the ability to maintain those vehicles, which is fundamentally different than how you maintain the old diesel-driven vehicles. And so we're appreciative of the fact that the federal government acknowledged that, and the bulk of that $16.8 million goes into allowing us to buy additional property, which we have done. The old Tommy Tire buildings south of the existing transit facility are being acquired by the City of Decatur, and then we're going to tear one of the buildings down and then transform the rest of them in ways that we can support the hybrid fleet that we will eventually acquire over several years. And so Senator Durbin's being here not only highlighted the fact that, yes, the City of Decatur was the recipient of a lot of funding, but also that we're taking the innovative steps to make sure that the changes we make to our fleet can be sustained over the long term, and that's extremely important. And we're doing it in a way that'll generate jobs, because, like I said, buying a bus doesn't generate, from some other place, even though they're $500,000 a piece, doesn't generate any new jobs here in Decatur. But retrofitting that building, putting solar panels on the roof of the retrofitted building, and other improvements to that property, that will generate jobs for our trades here in Decatur. Later this week, we're going to be receiving a delegation from Tokorozawa, Japan. Tokorozawa, Japan is one of two sister city relationships that the City of Decatur has. The other is with the city of Siebetal in Germany. And Tokorozawa is also the name, in part because of this Sister Cities program, where there's a small lake next to Sangamon River that has that same name, in part because of that sister city relationship. So folks from that Japanese city will be visiting our city, and for a couple of days interacting with city officials. As someone who's traveled internationally, I can tell you that it's really interesting to find out how cities in other countries provide services, because in many cases how local government operates in another country is fundamentally different than it is in the United States or here in the state of Illinois. And there's a lot of learning that can come from that. Finally, I want to mention that we are in budget season. The City of Decatur's fiscal year for budget and financial planning purposes is January 1st to December 31st. And the law requires that we adopt a budget prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, which we always do. We aren't the federal government, and we can't adopt a budget 4 or 5 months into the fiscal year with continuing resolutions. We have to have a balanced budget, and we have to have it adopted before the beginning of the fiscal year, and we always do. Sadly, the most attention to government budgets seems to be at the federal level, which is perhaps the most dysfunctional example of how to do budgeting. The city council's the city manager's recommended budget that the city council will begin reviewing later in November is a balanced budget, and in a couple of days it'll be available for public viewing on the city's website. Later on in the fall, after the city council has conducted their own study sessions to make revisions and amendments to the recommended budget, there'll be a public hearing and a public engagement process as well for citizens to comment on the budget prior to its final adoption, which I predict will happen in December, several weeks before the beginning of the new fiscal year. It doesn't generate a lot of news because it happens routinely behind the scenes, all in accordance with the requirements of the law. Thanks very much for joining us at this video, and I look forward to sharing more information about the city at the next installment.